Drugs was in the 50s everywhere, but everywhere. And it was potent then too, and cheap.
He was missing a tooth, his skin was in bad shape, and he was forced to have lip sync. It was sad for most of his fans to witness.
Frankie Lymon died at such a young age, but many people don't know just how tragic his life really was.
I've often said over the years that if Frankie were still with us today, he would have been our generation's Sammy Davis Jr. He would have been the darling of the Vegas Strip because he had that kind of talent.
Saying he lived tragically would honestly be an understatement. From as young as 15, he was involved in things no child should ever face. And sadly, life didn't improve as he grew older. Not even his success with the group or his solo career could save him. So, what exactly did Frankie Lymon go through that led to such a heartbreaking end?
When I met Frankie, there was no sign of drug use when he was with me. We discussed this, and I told him that I would not put up with it.
Let's find out.
Baby, baby, how I want you, baby, baby.
As a young boy in Harlem, Frankie was involved in hustling, and according to some accounts, even facilitated interactions between prostitutes and white men for commission. This paints a stark picture of the harsh realities of his childhood and the environment he navigated before fame. At the time, Frankie was already in a hard place. He had started using drugs without even meaning to. He said he first tried heroin when he was still in the group. A woman much older than him took him to a hotel room. She was starstruck by his fame and wanted to feel powerful. She used heroin and asked Frankie if he wanted to try a skin pop. Frankie did not know what that was, but she told him it was easy. He did not feel danger. He let her inject a little dose just under his skin. He felt a strong rush and liked how it made him feel. He got hooked right away.
Drugs was in the 50s everywhere, but everywhere. And it was potent then too, and cheap.
Frankie was only 12 when he began doing heroin. He still sang with the teenagers, but the drug began to take over his mind. He did skin pops more and more until he needed a stronger high. Soon, he became a full addict. He also used marijuana and other small drugs, but heroin was the worst. The grown-ups around him did not stop it. They watched as he wasted away, still hoping to make money off his voice.
We used to rehearse in hallways a lot. When the weather was terrible, we took advantage of the hallway with the echo. We knew about 5 or 6 songs that we sang over and over again.
Back in the 1950s, Frankie and the Teenagers were the hottest thing in music. Girls would show up wherever the band was just to catch a glimpse of Frankie. Before long, they were traveling all across America, performing in all 48 states and playing in some of the biggest theaters and on TV. Frankie and the Teenagers were groundbreaking. They appealed to everyone, no matter their background, black, white, or Hispanic. They became one of the first true crossover groups. Boris Levy, one of the owners of G Records, became their manager. But things took a turn in 1956 when he played a role in breaking up the group. Before that, Frankie and the Teenagers released 9 hit singles and performed at massive rock and roll shows. Someone told Frankie Lymon to leave his group and go solo. It happened on a busy tour in Europe. Frankie loved singing, and people already saw him as the star. He shined on stage like Diana Ross did with her group. But going solo in the way they did was not a good idea at all. Frankie was only 12 when the producer, George Goldner, began to push him. George called Frankie into a small room and said, "You can be even bigger if you do songs all by yourself." Frankie did not know much about business. He trusted the grown-ups around him. Then, George made one quick phone call. The record company rushed out a new single called Goody Goody.
Goody, goody, so you met someone and now you know how it feels. Goody, goody.
And they put Frankie Lymon and the Teenagers on the label. But the Teenagers did not sing on it. Another group did the voices you heard in the background. Frankie and his friends found out later. They felt cheated. Frankie did not even know the teenagers were left out until it was too late.
I've often said over the years that if Frankie were still with us today, he would have been our generation's Sammy Davis Jr. He would have been the darling of the Vegas Strip because he had that kind of talent.
Also, they faced a big problem. Goldner signed the young group to his label and promised to help them. He paid for their studio time and helped them make records. Yet, Frankie and his friends saw only small checks. They did not know how much money their music made on radio or in stores. Goldner kept the bigger shares. Frankie and the teenagers worked hard on stage and in the studio, but they did not receive fair pay. Goldner also made shady business moves. He sold his share of G Records to a mobster named Morris Levy, but not before taking credit for a song that two members of the group, Frankie and Herman Santiago, had written during the tour. Levy took over Goldner's label. Levy was known for his rough style and secret deals. He had a reputation for strong-arming musicians and making them sign unfair agreements. When Levy owned the label, Frankie and the teenagers still saw little benefit from their work. Levy handled the money behind closed doors. He paid out small sums for live shows and record sales. He often delayed payments. Some artists said they never received the money they were promised. Frankie's solo career began in 1957. He recorded a few more songs alone, but his voice lost its sparkle because he used drugs so much.
Whenever he would go out to sing, people asked him to do, "Hey, Frankie, what about doing Why Do Fools Fall in Love?" He tried, but he could no longer do that. So it was kind of frustrating to him.
In late 1957, he appeared on the TV show Alan Freed's Big Beat. He was 13 by then. During his dance, he held hands with a white teenage girl. People saw nothing wrong today, but back then, it caused a big uproar. The station erased and recorded over the footage so no one could see it again. Frankie lost that chance at national TV fame. By 1958, Frankie's solo career had stalled. Record sales dropped. Promoters stopped booking him. He drifted from place to place, singing here and there for little pay. He felt embarrassed and sad. He had once been a child star with his friends, but now he had no group and no hit songs.
It was sad for most of his fans to witness.
Frankie also sold his publishing rights for very little money. Whoever held these rights got money each time the song played on the radio, appeared in a movie, or sold in stores. Frankie sold these rights because he needed cash right away. He accepted a small sum and signed papers without a lawyer to guide him. He may have felt pressure to get money fast. Maybe he did not know how valuable those rights could become over time. As years passed, his hit songs kept earning money. Each radio play and each record sale gave money to the rights owner. But Frankie and his family no longer got that income. His heirs could not collect for the music that had made their father famous. The sale left a long-term hole in their family income. Because even after his death, Frankie Lymon couldn't find peace. His legacy became a topic of heated debate because he never divorced any of his wives. This caused a big fight over his inheritance when he passed away. His name, once the voice of young love, became worth millions. But the money he earned never truly went to him while he was alive. Frankie Lymon's hit song, Why Do Fools Fall in Love, is a classic. It's still played today in commercials and movies. He was supposed to get royalties from the song, but his old manager, a man named Levy, had stolen the rights to the song's publishing. Because of this, the royalties were out of Frankie's reach, as earlier mentioned.
It was used in American Graffiti. But it wasn't until Diana Ross re-recorded Why Do Fools Fall in Love in 1981 that all of a sudden, people suddenly said, where's all that money going?
After Frankie's death, his final wife, Myra, asked Levy for her share of the money. But Levy refused. He argued that Frankie had been married to 2 other women, and they should be involved in the fight over the money too. This led to a long court battle. Myra finally won and received a settlement of nearly $1 million in royalties. It's likely that amount would be much higher today, considering how much the song is still played.
We went to Mr. Levy and asked him for the royalty, and this is when the battle started. He said, no, I'm not going to give it to you. We decide we are going to court.
Sadly, the two teenagers who originally wrote "Why Do Fools Fall in Love" never saw any of the money either. They had lost their lawsuit because of a legal rule called the statute of limitations, which meant they could no longer sue. They had been cheated out of millions. Levy, on the other hand, walked away with what is now worth tens of millions of dollars.
Eventually, the ruling came down that Miss Waters did actually have a common law relationship with Frankie in Philadelphia, and therefore she was a winner.
A few months before, the teenagers had been in the studio with Frankie. He thought they all sang together on every song. Suddenly, Frankie saw his name in big letters with no mention of his friends. The grown-ups acted very sneaky. They never talked to Frankie about it first. They just did it. The teenagers were on tour, singing their hits, and never knew Frankie had already cut a solo record. It felt like a trick played on a child who did not know any better.
That was his way, if things got kind of rocky, he thought that was his way of holding the couple together, his way of making her feel good, like, baby, you know I love you. I love you, girl, I'm gonna make you my wife.
In mid-1963, something good happened. Frankie met a kind woman named Elizabeth "Mickey" Waters. She cared for him and understood his struggles. They started dating, and Frankie felt hope again. In January 1964, they married. They dreamed of a happy life. Soon, Mickey became pregnant, and they hoped their baby would bring joy. Their baby girl, Francine, arrived 2 days before Valentine's Day, 1964. Frankie named her after himself and Mickey. But the baby died 2 days later. Mickey fell into deep grief, and Frankie felt even worse. He could not handle the pain. He went back to heroin harder than before. His dreams of family sank in sorrow and addiction. After that, Frankie and Mickey grew apart. Mickey tried to help him, but Frankie pushed her away. He moved back to the streets, chasing the drug. He sang for spare change sometimes. He looked older than his age. People whispered about his lost talent and broken life. He went to Augusta, Georgia, in the summer of 1967, and he met his third wife, Miss Amira Eagle.
While he was in the Army, he was stationed in Augusta, Georgia, and he met a woman there who was a school teacher who he felt could help to turn his life around. And that woman was Amira Eagle, who became his wife.
Miss Amira worked as a school teacher. She spoke with a gentle southern drawl. She carried herself with calm grace. She wore modest dresses and smiled softly. Frankie had married 2 women before, Zola, who shone like a superstar, and Mickey Waters, a bold girl from New York City. Zola lived in glitter and lights. Mickey moved fast through crowded streets and noisy clubs. Frankie enjoyed them both, but he needed something different. He needed peace and a steady home. When he met Amira, he felt a warm comfort he had never known. He fell in love very fast. They talked for hours under big oak trees. They walked hand in hand by quiet rivers. By June 1967, they stood before a small group of friends and promised to stay together. Frankie and Amira wed in a humble church. He placed a simple ring on her finger. She placed one on his. They held each other close and dreamed of a bright future.
When I met Frankie, there was no sign of drug use when he was with me. We discussed this, and I told him that I would not put up with it.
Frankie loved Amira so much that he chose her over everything else. He had been in the Army and lived by strict rules. But when he thought of leaving her, he felt panic. One night, he slipped away without permission. He left his post and walked off into the dark. He knew what would happen, but he could not stay away from Amira's side. When the Army found out, they gave him a dishonorable discharge. They took his uniform and his rank. He lost his pay and any benefits. Still, he stood by his choice. He moved into a small house with his new wife. They learned to live with less money and fewer friends. Amira cooked simple meals on a round table. Frankie washed dishes by hand. He fetched water from the well. All day they talked and laughed. They planned a house full of children. They painted the rooms soft pastel colors. They read books under a single lamp. Life felt calm, and Frankie too smiled often. By February 1968, 7 months had passed since their wedding. Frankie began to feel restless. He missed the buzz of a stage and the hum of a crowd. He missed the bright lights and the cheers of fans. His voice had changed from a boy's high tone to a rich, full sound. He had practiced alone in that quiet, southern home. He strummed his guitar under the porch. He sang while Amira taught her students in the next room. But no one in Augusta knew his new voice. He longed to share it with the world. So he told Amira he needed to go back to New York City. She understood and kissed him on the cheek. She held his hands and whispered, "Be safe and come back soon." Frankie hugged her tight. He promised he would return quickly. When he arrived in New York City, he stayed at his grandmother's small apartment. The building was old and worn, with creaky floors and narrow hallways. His grandmother welcomed him with a warm stew and fresh bread. She reminded him of quiet days when he was a boy singing on street corners. She wiped his brow and encouraged him to follow his dream. Frankie wrote songs late into the night. He called his friend Sam Bray, a music man who believed in him. Sam met him at a little cafe on a busy street corner. He listened to Frankie sing and watched the way his feet tapped to the beat. Sam saw that Frankie had grown into a strong man with a fine voice. He offered to clean him up and set him back on stage. Sam dressed Frankie in sharp suits. He taught him to style his hair into a neat pompadour. He gave him shining shoes and crisp white shirts. Frankie looked in the mirror and saw a new man. He felt proud as he walked down the sidewalk. People stopped and stared. Children called out, "There's Frankie!" Adults tipped their hats and smiled. Sam took him into a recording studio. The walls were lined with shiny microphones and thick soundproofing. Frankie stepped up to the mic. He sang 2 songs, "I'm Sorry,"
I'm sorry,
and "Sea Breeze."
it's my home and they call it.
He poured his heart into every note. The music swirled around him like a gentle wave. He finished and felt a warm glow. He believed these songs would reach every radio station. He felt sure they would climb the charts. After the recording, he returned to his grandmother's place with a wide grin. The sky was soft and pink at sunset. Frankie wanted to celebrate. He thought one small taste of something strong would mark his return. He found a small kit that he had hidden long ago.
He was in his grandmother's apartment, and he shot up, and he died in the bathroom on the floor.
It contained needles and a little bag of white powder. He had not touched drugs for over a year. His body had healed. He felt curious. He told himself it would be just this once. He set the needle and pressed it to his arm. He felt the rush of warmth spread through his veins. It made him smile. His head felt light and dreamy. He lay down on a cold tile floor in the tiny bathroom. He closed his eyes and drifted. Frankie never woke up. The needle had brought more than a brief joy. It took his last breath. His grandmother found him the next morning. She held him close and wept softly. She called Amira with trembling hands. Amira dropped her book in the classroom. She ran to the phone booth. She heard the news and fell to her knees. She cried out in labored sobs. The world outside that phone booth went quiet. Frankie Lymon died on February 28, 1968, in that small bathroom on the bathroom floor. He was 25 years old.
I often wonder if he had not elected to try to come back to New York and try to re-energize his career, if somehow he would still be with us.
People said he had everything he needed. He had found love and a fresh start. He had a grown man's voice ready to amaze the crowd. He had friends who believed in his star, yet he slipped away again, just as success seemed so near. His story felt like a whisper in the wind, a song that faded too fast. It showed how close happiness can sit beside heartbreak. His life filled 3 books and more tales than most men gather in twice that time. He married Amira, but they never shared a lifetime. The short life and lasting influence of Frankie Lymon and the Teenagers. Frankie Lymon and the Teenagers had a very short time in the spotlight, but their music left a big mark on the world. Their songs were fun, full of energy, and touched many people. Frankie had a high, sweet voice that made him sound different from other singers. People said his voice helped shape the sound of girl groups that came later.
I walked away and I got back uptown. I said, how can I tell these kids you don't want to record them because they're too young? They sing, they're in show business. As far as I was concerned, they had a talent. And then we made a deal. I'll rehearse your group, George, if you record mine.
Many famous singers looked up to him, like Michael Jackson, Diana Ross, Ronnie Spector, and Smokey Robinson. Groups like The Temptations and the Beach Boys also said Frankie's music influenced them. Even Billy Joel and George Clinton were fans. But the group that copied Frankie Lymon and the Teenagers the most was the Jackson 5. Michael Jackson, when he was a young boy, sang just like Frankie. Berry Gordy, who started Motown Records, said he got many ideas from Frankie's group. He used their style to create many Motown stars. In 1973, a movie called American Graffiti came out. It used Frankie's most famous song, Why Do Fools Fall in Love, in the movie's soundtrack. This helped bring Frankie's music back to life for younger people who never heard it before. His music felt fresh again, even though it was made many years earlier. Then, in 1979, singer Joni Mitchell sang Why Do Fools Fall in Love during a live show in California. She put the song on her live album, Shadows and Light. She also added some lines from another Frankie Lymon song called I'm Not a Juvenile Delinquent. This showed that artists from different music styles still respected Frankie and wanted to keep his memory alive.
Why do they fall in love?
Frankie Lymon's name kept popping up in many places. A rock band from England called The Fall talked about him in one of their songs in 1979. Later, in 1991, another English group, Everything But the Girl, mentioned Frankie in a song called Boxing and Pop Music. He was even part of a short story written by famous horror writer Stephen King. The story was about a town full of dead music stars, and Frankie Lymon was one of the strange characters. In the story, he did something shocking. He hurt a woman who tried to help the main characters escape. Even though the story was fiction, it showed how Frankie still lived in people's minds. In 1993, Frankie Lymon and the Teenagers were given a big honor. They were added to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Later, in 2000, they were also added to the Vocal Group Hall of Fame. These awards showed that even though their time was short, they changed music in a big way. People still remembered them with love and respect. Years later, in 1998, a movie called Why Do Fools Fall in Love told Frankie's life story. The movie was not 100% true, but it showed how 3 women, all saying they were his wife, fought over who owned his music and money. Lorenz Tate played Frankie. Halle Berry, Vivica A. Fox, and Layla Rochon played the 3 women. The movie did not make a lot of money, and reviews were mixed, but it helped people learn about Frankie's life again. In 2012, a band called the Mountain Goats made a song named Harlem Roulette. The song talked about Frankie Lymon and his final night alive. The singer of the band said he wanted to show how sad and lonely Frankie's last moments might have been. Even many years after his death, people were still singing about him. Frankie Lymon died young, but his voice and his songs stayed in the hearts of many. His music opened doors for others and left a strong memory that will never fade.